As previously presented, we are having three great guests today to speak a bit about a practical use case on digital product passports. So I would kindly ask you to introduce yourselves.
Hi, hopefully you can all hear me. I'll try and speak loudly. My name is Phil Pyman. We're not sitting under our photographs, we're sort of moving around a bit. I lead I'm VP of Digital Transformation at LyondellBasell. I've been with LyondellBasell all my career, which is over 35 years now, across various functions in the organisation in various geographies. I've been leading this team for the last 18 months or so, and my role and my role of my team is to help drive and enable the digital transformation of LyondellBasell, focusing on innovation in new technology spaces, building on our innovative history in process and catalysts and products. We're now looking to use digital technology to innovate and drive new solutions and value in the business. So it's great to be with you all this afternoon.
Hello everybody, good afternoon from my side. I'm Isabella Tonaco, I'm VP of Strategy, Execution, Marketing for Renewable Polymers Chemicals Unit at Neste. I have about more than 10 years experience with renewables, different roles. Within Neste I'm about 3 years in the company. And for me, it's super important to understand what are the value drivers to bring sustainability claims, the sustainability promise at the end of the day to the consumer. So I have been thrilled to work with this team, and several of you have been part of this project in order to take full advantage of innovative solutions like digital platforms or digital solutions like the ones from Circularise, and how can we combine this expertise along the value chain to drive sustainability forward. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Isabella. So my name's Phil Brown. I'm also a collection of VPs, but I think theirs is a bit more impressive than mine. I work on the business development and strategy side. I'm trying to bring circular economy knowledge to the functionalities of blockchain. How can we help these actors across the supply chain work together to really bring new materials, new ideas to the market? My key interest within digital product passports is that this could become a mechanism to really unlock a lot of potential around new circular business models, recovery of materials, and actually create a functioning circular economy. Really good to be here today. I'm very happy to see so many faces who've also supported this project. So thank you so much for your attention and your time.
Thank you, Phil. So then for starting, maybe a question for LyondellBasell. How does the vision from LyondellBasell towards sustainability and circularity could look like?
Well, thanks. Yeah, certainly it's a great question. It's a very important question, and it's something that's very central to our company's strategy for the future. And we're one of the largest chemicals and plastics companies in the world, and we recognise with that scale and reach, it gives both a responsibility and an ability to influence the value chain such that we can have a really positive impact on the societies which we serve. We're in the world's biggest trade fair for plastics and rubbers. Walking around the stands here, you see the products on display at all the companies, and you just can't fail to be touched by just how critical what we do is to the society that we all live in. But we recognise that there's a need to make sure as we go into the future, we deliver these products and solutions in a way that society wants and expects. So for us, we've got kind of three core pillars. It's around ending plastic waste in the environment. Circularity is key to that, and a project like this is absolutely key to that. It's around mitigating the impact of climate change. Our products themselves help to mitigate the impact of climate change. Our processes are energy intensive. We recognise that, and we need to respond to that and adapt. And the third pillar is the thriving society, making sure that we can contribute to that for all of our stakeholders. So that's the way we think about sustainability as a central core of our strategy. In fact, you may have seen we recently announced some changes at our executive committee level of the company, and you see Sustainable and Low Carbon Solutions is now a strategic business unit for LyondellBasell, and that just shows how much we see the importance of this. So it's central. This project's been a fantastic example of the future, what the future could look like, and how we can, from a digital perspective, utilise, leverage new technologies to help drive that sustainability ambition.
Thank you, Phil. So aligned with what Phil was telling us, Isabella, maybe from Neste perspective now, what do you think are the challenges that the chemical sector is facing towards this sustainability and circularity map? Thank you. I think it's a super important question. It's always about how do you translate a vision into reality? How do you bring this to implementation? And I think there are at least three elements I'd like to highlight here in the supply chain that we are all working together. First of them is about having a common understanding, an industry common understanding about the definitions, the claims, the KPIs that we should be all striving towards. There is still a lot of confusion in terminology and how to understand methodologies. And as long as this is still the fact, there is a strong delay in implementation of sustainability strategies. The second point is the complexity of this value chain. Yeah? So we are very upstream at Neste. We are sourcing to the value chain feedstocks that can replace fossil materials. But if you look into polymers and chemicals, you will have multiple tiers of suppliers and customers that have multiple sites with a big number of products, that have a number of ingredients and so forth. So when you put all this together, how do you share data in an efficient way, in a safe way, without disclosing your competitive edge? It's very complex and it's very still manually driven. And the last piece is also about how do you back up those claims that you want to bring the consumer on board? How do you incentivize sustainable consumption? In order to do that, you need to back up with data. And back to my previous point, if the whole data sharing is trouble to be executed and implemented, you would have a lot of issues to bring these claims into reality so that the consumer feel free to choose between A or B products because it has an educated decision behind based on facts. These are, I think, three of the main challenges, but we can discuss a lot about it, that I think digital solutions can enable to unlock.
So we talked about data, we have talked also about collaboration. So maybe just open question to Neste and LyondellBasell in this sense. How do you see collaboration between B2B happening? What are the challenges around that? How do you see this also backed up with digital transition?
I think it's something that's really quite different. I think when we think about digital, I think we recognise that more and more collaboration all along the value chain with new players. We weren't working with Circularise till quite recently, right? A very different sort of company with a very different skill set and expertise to ours. So I think what we recognise in the transformations we're going through, be it a digital transformation, be it the transformation of the energy systems, not one of us has all the answers. Right? We need to recognise that in the past, big chemical companies like ours used to have quite rightly a very protective view of technology and intellectual property, and we need to maintain that. But we also need to be more open to this concept of we need to accept that others have the answers maybe to help us. We know what we know. Knowing what you don't know is sometimes as important as knowing what you do know. So by collaborating with different players in the value chain, you bring new perspectives, new technology perspective, new ways of working, and you get new insights. So for us, in all of our digital projects, we're collaborating all along the value chain, and particularly in this case, upstream to our very important feedstock suppliers, technology providers, technology innovators, through to our converters. You see the samples of product here, which are our customers making products that the end user buys. So collaborating all along the value chain and collaborating with new innovators is absolutely central to digital transformation. We won't, and transformation of the business, we won't get there on our own. So recognising that's been important, and it's enabled us to build some new partnerships, collaborations on some very exciting projects like this.
Thank you. So, question for Circularise.
Could I also expand on that?
Yeah, sure. Please do.
Yeah, because I think just drawing it together, so my background actually and my PhD research was how to facilitate collaborative innovation across the supply chain. So how do you bring actors together? And I think we've just discussed here about common understanding, dealing with complexity. The supply chains that we're all dealing with, they're so complex, we're seeing challenges reflected across an organization. Think of the, semiconductor crisis that's just been happening, polymers, the energy prices going up. So no company can do this by themselves. And we can't actually develop a circular economy without all of these different actors working together. And I think the aspect that I would also look at is how you use digital transition to facilitate the implementation of actual collaboration. Because what is collaboration? It's about sharing information. There is nothing worse to a collaborative engagement and saying, can you sign this NDA, this contract and all of this before I share anything with you? That's not very collaborative. We're very good at collaborating within our own company, but when we try and collaborate across the value chain, it all falls down. And actually what I've really enjoyed within this collaboration we've been working on is not just the people we've been working with, but the fact that we're able to test the technology that moves beyond that, that you can actually have sensitive information hidden behind a system that allows you to actually share it without losing your proprietary data. So that was my...
And align with that, Phil, can you tell us a bit how digital passports are aligned with this collaboration strategy, with this sharing data? How are they also facilitating this exchange of data within the value chain?
Yeah, so I mean, digital product passports, I actually gave a talk on this earlier today. It's a very expansive policy. I mean, if you look at the letters of what the EU wants, they want to have all of the information, they want to control it all, they want everybody to share it openly, they want a bit of a, let's call it a data utopia. Is that going to happen? Probably not. Will you share your sensitive information with these guys? No, yeah, probably not. But what's the end goal? The end goal is that that data can be referenced so that consumers can actually make better decisions about the materials that they're buying, the products that they're using, and also know what happens to them at the end of life. We have a very short period of time to really create these cyclical loops, and I think a digital product passport is just a mechanism to that end goal. And that end goal is to implement material recovery, new materials coming in, biological materials. We actually have the example here with Samsonite of taking waste materials and bringing it back in. Now, the criteria for you to do that and for Samsonite to use it, how much information do they need that you have to provide them?
I'm not going to give that information, by the way, but just, yeah, I know you thought I was. But save that for later. By the way, another very interesting part, as Phil said, working with different companies, we have to learn to adapt to work with a company like Circularise. Circularise with us too, but you find the sweet spot because we've gone very quickly on this, and that's not, agility is not something that companies the size of LyondellBasell are necessarily famous for in the past. So getting better in that space again comes back to digital. But I think that visibility and traceability, and by learning in a project like this, you start to learn all those types of questions about, well, that's interesting, what will we want to share, what will we not want to share? And at the end of the day, it comes down to this consumer expectation, and then there's a need. And we want, we talk about increasing the recovery, the circular economy, and this aspiration we have 2 million tons of recycled or renewable plastic in the value chain from our company by 2030. We've got to close the gaps to stopping that happening, and one of the gaps is that traceability. So this digital product passport, the concept behind this, if we can be much clearer of what exactly is in that chain, we'll be enabled, I believe, to drive that sort of growth in the business which we aspire to. So transparency of the things which we all can agree are the right things the consumer wants to get. It makes it cyclical, makes it bring back in the value chain. So getting that right is fundamental. So just closing that gap that leads to leakage out and into the environment, that's what we want to stop. We want to end plastic in the environment. This helps us close that loop and stop the leakage. So.
Yeah, and I think to add, we discussed a lot about how do we get there, and I think it's also important to highlight a key success factor. And for me, one key success factor of this collaboration, the prototype that we drove together, it was about having a shared purpose, and that we have also similar values. I think whatever collaboration you drive forward is always built on the basis, the foundation, that you have the same vision, that you want to strive for the same goal, and at the end it becomes a natural step to collaborate because you want to basically co-create, co-develop, because we are all looking to do the same thing. And I think that was a big learning for me. It was very natural, and we started discussing also what is coming next, because the first layer is to have the understanding what we want, how do we make this visible in a tool that we can share with others, but how do we go beyond? What are the new criteria that the market, that the consumer, the society will be looking after, and how do we bring those changes, those projects, this really on-the-ground change already in early phases in manufacturing, in sourcing, any digital solutions.
Yeah, thank you, Isabella. So, just to put a bit in context of the project that happens between LyondellBasell and Neste, Circularise as facilitator, the relevance of this project was that we did a prototype, like translating things from regulatory framework into really context of companies, has some challenges, has some learnings, and we brought it into 2 specific supply chains. We involved all the suppliers, and we got a first outcome that it's beyond the regulatory framework. So I would say, in this sense, maybe if you can share some of the learnings of this process from framework really to bring it into real life. How would you?
Yeah, I think, well, also kudos to you to Circularise, yeah. I think one very nice learning for me was how fast you took feedback, yeah, from industry players. Because there is a lot of complexity, all of the things we discussed here, how you share data, how you touch also upon complex topics without, burning the bridges. And that you took those feedback and you translated products in such a speed that it was very remarkable. The other thing is also, ways of working. So driving clarity, bringing transparency, and also in a constructive way. I think also support all of us here to share our thoughts and what we want to go beyond in order to make it real. So congratulations to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at some of my team members in the room here, I mean, we sat around a few months ago thinking, could we be here at the K Fair talking about a digital product passport prototype? And we said, yeah, well, we can. And we thought, that's going to be quite a challenge. It's not that long ago. So the speed, the agility, and the agile way of working, the quick recycle loops, it's nice. The big value chain players and an innovative startup, new company. It's a great combination. And then we've learned things like what kind of data, where is the data? What do we need to get the right data? And how do we, what kind of data might we need? Might it be different? So great learnings. And we liken it to being, instead of being in a laboratory, we moved from the laboratory to the pilot plant to the commercial plant. We're operating in a little laboratory here where we're testing it. And we're learning by testing. I think that's been a fantastic thing for me to see how quickly with this collaboration and our downstream customers, Uponor and Samsonite, have the mega polyethylene pipe as well as the suitcase example. How that collaboration has happened so fast and how we've learned from each other. We've learned a lot about the technology and how it can be applied in this industry.
So, beyond the lens of the larger companies, I think one of the key things that we see as a startup with working with large companies like this, okay, you've said about the speed at which you do, but also about the level of complexity to which it takes to make changes. And what I see on the other side, so Circularise is part of the public consultations on digital product passports. And actually there isn't one yet for plastics. And you guys came to us and said, we would like to do this because we'd like to be ahead of the game. Now that ability to then turn around to the policymakers and say, look, as an industry that has been hit and approached, and if you ask most consumers, are plastics good? Probably not, when actually they're probably one of the best materials we've ever made. In fact, they're too good. But by proxy of us putting forward this collaboration, we can say there are industry players that are taking those steps, working with startups, working together, so that you can actually then put forward a common position and say, okay, the regulation is coming, we know that will be effect, but why not try it in this way? Why not try that? And these types of proof of concept, and admittedly we need to go the next step to consumers to understand what information is going to resonate with them. Do I share my percentage of recycled content to a consumer? Maybe. In what percentage do I share the methodology? Does that matter? Is that going to resonate? And I think for us, that's the next step. How do we actually engage the wider public outside of the K-Show here and try and say, okay, what is the information that you need that will actually, firstly, resonate with you, and secondly, allow you to make a confident decision that you are buying a sustainable product, that is backed up. And we're not there yet. So I would invite anyone in the audience, if that's a challenge that you also see, to also reach out to us and the collaboration here, because again, 3 parties can't do this by ourselves. So I think we'd also want to scale this as well.
Yes, sure. And we have talked about B2B sharing information. Now Phil was outlining that this is also business to consumer. So maybe just a final question in this topic for both LyondellBasell and Neste. How do you envision that digital passports can facilitate this communication, this power to communicate better from an upstream player to the consumer? how do you see this potential maybe after running this pilot?
Yeah, I think that the digital product passport is an enabler for consumers to make accurate decisions. But in order to achieve that, it also needs to be simple. So if we want to get the consumer on board, all the topics we've discussed, making life cycle assessments, very complex definitions, this is too much to bring to a consumer in order to make a decision to buy this product or that product. So I think it's also part of the collaborative work that we needed to have towards the future to make it simple so that it's tangible. And to me, it's a dream coming true. So how do you incentivize sustainable consumption? Is by creating transparency, by enabling claims to be simple and backed up, so that over time more sustainable products become the norm, and the non-sustainables they fade away. So I hope that step towards this future.
I'd agree with that entirely, and I think it's very exciting to think, if you look at these examples here and on the stand in Hall 8 at LyondellBasell, there's a QR code on the article, you can scan the QR code. The vision is you bring up the relevant information so the consumer could literally scan an article in the future. And when they would look at the information there, the information through consultations, through collaboration, through working with regulation, etc., is the composite information of everything that's relevant along the value chain from start to finish. That's pretty exciting, because then it's traceable, it's auditable, it's trusted, and that's going to be key to everybody's sustainability ambitions. So to have that ability, I think is really exciting. Sustainable choice. You can differentiate yourself if you can prove through a very simple approach that someone can see transparently what they're buying. That I think is what we already see consumers want. And that need is only going to get stronger. So for me, it's taking a complex value chain, collecting the information in a way that's relevant all along that value chain, and presenting it in a very simple way, that's easy to digest.
Just to say on the future vision, because again, that point to consumer, I think further, end-of-life recovery. So with the guys with LyondellBasell, they've taken waste, mixed bag of waste materials. You've done all the hard work of actually bringing it back in. Also with Neste, taking the recovered cooking oil. So these guys are bringing materials that would have otherwise been thrown away or in a landfill, and then making useful products out of it. But that's still one cycle. So then how do we take it to the next step that actually the end-of-life recycler brings it back? And actually we start getting this, because think about how many of you at the moment are struggling with input materials for any of your processes right now. If you can have a preferred buyback option on your plastic that you sell today, that in 10, 20 years, how long does a Samsonite suitcase last for? I don't know. 15 years, but if you know that you have that, depends how you use it, but if you can then have that material come back and you then start to have resource flows where you can actually monitor this, that's where I see the future of digital product passports coming.
So if I think we covered much of the topics that we wanted to discuss today, so I think now we can leave room for some questions. So if anyone of the assistants has any doubts that they want to share, don't be shy. Don't be shy.
Could be questions as well.
Yeah, we came to learn. So anyone has just any doubt, even for the pilot itself that we ran, for the prototype that we delivered, we also have some samples here. You can also go to LyondellBasell booth to find more information. Sure.
You mentioned to LyondellBasell. How many points of data did you put in the prototype? How many data points did you found to be valuable?
Well, I think not too many to start with. We're mainly focusing on the types. So we've been focusing on what types of information would it be. Recycled, traceable, recycled content would be one example. Emissions footprint would be another example. So we had a long suite of things that we're thinking about. To test it, we were just mainly trying a few, I guess. Funny, what was it in the end? Number of data points?
Certifications as well?
Sorry?
Certifications?
And certifications, yeah. Certifications we collect. So when you go on if you scan the article, you'll see the sample data we put in and the things we've got placeholders for.
Any other questions around digital passports? Also, take the opportunity to ask companies.
Is it clear what we're talking about? I guess that's because we often get that question. What exactly is it? And we've tried to bring it to life in terms of what it means, both from the technology perspective and the practicality perspective, and the material. And that point that Phil was making about the end of life and recycling back in the value chain is very, very central to this.
Yeah, I think it's also relevant to outline that in this project, something that was done, as you know, there's not a clear regulatory framework still for plastics. So there was a high effort to understand some examples as the battery passport data points, and then we needed an effort to translate them into the chemical industry, which is the main goal for now, to have and push for a standard that makes sense and being the industry, the pushing step towards the regulation and not otherwise. So the more examples, and this is why we just didn't stick to one supply chain, but two of different goods. So normally this is sector related and product related. So at the end of the day, we really wanted to go deep and explore multiple supply chains to do a relevant work.
Maybe to add here, Laura, I think it's also a preparation step, as you mentioned. Yeah. So looking ahead and also the complexity we address so many times here, in order to have the operating system, especially manufacturing and industry, ready for this challenge, is a massive, massive work ahead of us. So if we don't start now, we will not be able actually to execute. And I do believe that this will become a license to operate for everybody in the industry sooner or later. So very important and timely work.
I think that is a great point, and just putting on your question, of course, when you do start thinking about what you could do with this and the complexity of our value chains and our product formulations in this industry, well, the end, it could be quite, could go a long, long way. So I think, but it keeps him up at night. It keeps us up at night. But no, but that's how you learn. Like you learn by starting small and you go in steps, and also this key point about engaging with the regulator and be together like this in a collaboration. I think that helps a lot when we go in, and also from our side, little perspective from a large company. The team we pull together to work on this internally is truly multifunctional. We've been government affairs in, we've been the commercial folks in, the technology folks in, but then you get a very broad perspective of all the key elements to it, which again is something that's great in this sort of collaboration.
Yeah, sure, and also we have a question there? Yes, please.
Great panel discussion, guys. Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. A question to Circularise is how do you see the interoperability of systems going forward, and what's your take on it?
A really good question, and I don't know if that was a plant, I didn't do it myself, but I'd say one of our core value propositions is that we operate on a public blockchain system. The reason being is if I take either of these actors with me, they're supplying materials into loads of different sectors. So and we're talking about what data sets to share. Automotive asks for a different data set. Aerospace will ask for a completely different data set. So interoperability, what we're trying to do is we're trying to set up a protocol where a system that we're creating can be read by others as well, similar to how email functions. We're doing this with some of our onboarding customers. We're open for invites for anyone else to join because again, it's a protocol that everybody needs to operate on. And also our competitors need to operate upon this because, let's just be honest, no one single actor can do traceability. I mean, this gets a little bit Orwellian, 1984. If one company is providing all material data, that would be quite a scary space. So actually, it's good to have multiple actors working together. But again, I would touch back, interoperability is critical for this end of life. Because how am I going to deal with a recycler whose profit margins are minimal, and I'm saying you have to use this system or this system across the whole value chain. So if we can create this shared ecosystem, we can reduce the cost. Interoperability is critical to all of that, in my view. Without it, we're just basically creating bigger silos and shifting the problem.
And then you can invest the money in sustainability projects.
I can't answer that.
Also feel maybe there's also the issue about the vocabulary, right? So the common framework of a vocabulary understanding, not just really interoperability of systems, but really getting to a common framework that can be understood.
Do we have to solve everything in one panel?
No.
Okay, let's just take LCA as an example. Does anyone have a common methodology for using LCA? No. How many different customers are asking you for different data sets? Can you include your reproduction scrap? Can you not? No one is actually creating these rules. So again, that's why, to Renée's point about interoperability, there needs to be ability for the data to be shared across different systems, because different actors may need a different data set and methodology to process it to come out with a different answer. So I think this is where regulation will help, but also industry-led collaborations that come together and say, hey, this works, let's test it, let's try. And actually, with the carbon impact, with water, with all of these different metrics, actually just having a standardized data template, that actually took us quite a bit of time. I mean, Jürgen, your point about how many data points did you put in, okay, on the top flight it's not great, because you want everything there, but actually even just to structure that across the different actors, that took enough time. And that's not a standardized process yet. So interoperability and standardization are two big challenges. But again, don't expect Circularise to solve all that by ourselves. So if you'd like to join us on this journey as well, by all means, please do so.
Any other questions? Yes, we have a question here.
Thank you for the talk, it's really interesting. I have a question to LyondellBasell. We are from a chemical company, it's quite a big company also, and I really agree with what you mentioned. And my question is, for the digital product category, everybody knows that it's important to disclose some information for the consumers, but as mentioned in the talk, we are not used to disclose the information as a manufacturer. I mean, we are used to hide the information. So when you do the project, were there any discussion internally? Were there people who doesn't want to, disclose, and people say, oh, it's okay, no, because, yeah.
No, it was all perfect. No more discussions. Now, there are discussions. There will always be discussions. There will always be discussions, because we need to strike the right balance, right? We need transparency, as we talked about. Consumers expect the transparency. But we're not about to disclose everything in terms of proprietary IP. It wouldn't be sensible for the industry. So we need to find the right balance. So I think we need to work out for what does the consumer really need, what do they expect. We talk to them, we work with then there's collaborative impact down the value chain. And that's how we're going to go forward, right? We're going to have to look at it, be perhaps more open than we have been, to share the information that we believe they need, that they believe they need. Yeah? But it's not a simple, straightforward answer. But there's certain things that will not be, that it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't necessarily mean anything.
Yeah, and I think two points here. And I think the beauty of doing this project and the others that will come, I'm certain, is that by the first time we have the ability to decouple competitive edge information from sustainability attributes. Right? Because you have a secure system that can enable this change. So that is unique, and that's why it's so exciting. And I think the other part is also how to engage the consumers to make things that really drive impact. We can also decide a number of criteria, but if the framework does not enable changes that can be measured, can be reported, and can also always be looked after, can we do better? Then we haven't achieved the goal.
Just on the data transparency and what to share, I would also give the example of Upper Those are pipings that go into a built environment construct. They're in situ for 30, 50, 60 years. We have no idea what information will be needed in 30, 40, 50, 60 years. We don't know if it'll be mechanically recycled, if it'll be chemically recycled. So we have to kind of get more comfortable with putting the data we have today in the product in some way, digital, in whatever way you want, so that at the point that it is needed, for whatever use case, it is there and available to be covered. Because if you asked 20 years ago, what would you need today for recycling methodology or recovery of materials or process, you'd have no idea. It's a crystal ball. So I think the challenge of getting to that point where you're more comfortable with saying this is what we have today and this is what we're willing to share, and maybe editing it in the future with a record that allows you to maintain that it has been edited, so you can't fraudulently change anything. That is the way we have to go. Because if we want to support new technologies, especially in chemical, for instance, in biopolymers also have a much higher order need of granularity of data, so that they can actually make the decisions to do investments on a large scale. Because these technologies, it's a bit of a chicken and egg. And if you're sitting there, well, we'll wait until the end of life recovery and then we'll add the data. At that point, it's too late.
And actually, you need as many technologies as possible, because we also learn everything that you do too much, you cause unintended consequences. So you always need to keep a balance between the different technologies, the different and positive impact that you try, so that collectively you have the change that you want to see it. So, any other questions? You have a question?
Thanks for the panel. So we've heard the perspective of a couple of actors in this value chain. We've also talked about the regulators, but what about certification bodies and what about certification schemes when it comes to digital product passports? What is the main role of these actors you see when it comes to digital product passports? Maybe Isabella, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think certification is a key pillar for many of this transition or transformation that we are going through in our industry. Why? Because you needed to have a framework that drives a robust chain of custody. Once you have that in place, then you can always increase and add additional attributes, do additional projects. And I think the beauty of having the digitalization supporting, strengthening the power of certification is that you have the best of the two. You have a framework that defines the criteria, that defines how the chain of custody needs to operate to achieve the sustainability targets, and at the same time you have the digitalization as an enabler to create that robustness, the effectiveness, less fraud, less error, and so forth. So to me, I think it starts a lot of the activity with certification, and then always aiming higher throughout collaborative efforts.
I agree entirely. I mean, we mentioned we put the certifications in the passport information when we go and be access it, but I think exactly they're complementary, I think, and it's an evolving field as we move further forward. It'll keep developing, but no, very much come together.
Also, maybe just a final topic that now I remembered on the disclosure of data. Could you tell us maybe, Phil, about the levels of disclosure that we can work, how this enables also, because I think we didn't touch this point, and I think it's interesting. How can you play with the different levels of disclosure between companies to enable sharing data, more transparency, with more comfort?
I'll give a top flight answer, but I think we're running out of time. So what I would also do is invite everyone to check the QR codes that are over here or on the LyondellBasell booth, because you will see how the data has been structured that is meant to be disclosed to that actor to do the operation that they need to do. So Circularise has developed multiple disclosure levels so we can have what's known as arranged proof. So for instance, on chemical composition, none of you in the room will ever share your accurate chemical composition for what you produce. It's your IP, you won't do it. Whereas what you've got to ask yourself is, what is the downstream brand wanting to know? Is it higher or lower than a certain threshold? Is that threshold going to allow it to be ROS certified or not? Is it going to go into a different mechanism because it's got toxic chemicals in, or substances of hazardous volatile chemicals? You need to then be able to provide that information so that the downstream brand can certify it, but you don't want to share your exact recipe. So that's our ranged proof. We can also, talking about certifications that are tracking across the supply chain, certain process will look at where is that from. So if you're looking at critical materials, are we using conflict minerals? Where are they coming from? Now, you can have certifications that do that, but then you need to set the membership So a company will not tell you where they're getting the material from, but they can tell you it is not from this predefined list, and you can validate that and check it afterwards as well. With other disclosure laws that we have can have fully public, so everything can go onto the website, onto the Ethereum network, or you can have a mixed bag of disclosure dependent on what the use case is. That's where I would say, but that's a very top-flight answer, it's very abstract. I would check the QR codes and have a look at the different types of disclosure levels that we're able to provide.
Thank you very much.